to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm excited to have back again on the show Mr. Jim Estill. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me back, Tom.
Hey, Jim, it's exciting to have you back here. And before we get going here, I just want to tell the audience that you and I have done an interview just shortly in the past, and it was a great interview. People can go and check that one out. And the other day on LinkedIn, I followed a news feed and found something quite interesting that you were doing. And I thought, I want to get Jim back to talk about this. And I want to tell everybody a little bit about you before I turn it to you. And that is, when I met you, we learned that you were the CEO of Danby Appliances and another company called ShipperBee. And then what I learned was fascinating, that Jim started a business in believe it or not, the trunk of his car in university. And he grew it into a $2 billion company. And you might say, what is that? Or did you say 2 billion? And absolutely. I mean, this is a rare accomplishment. We don't see that very often. So you're going to get some wisdom from Jim today. And then most recently, he's been doing something innovative in the current times. I also want to tell you that Jim's very humble. In 2018, he won the award of the Order for Canada. And in 2019, the Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And I think that's a lot about really the story you're going to hear about what he's doing in society. So, Jim, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, that's great. Jim, last time we talked to you, we heard all about your backstory, your passions for not only being a CEO, but becoming a philanthropist. You told us some things that you were doing to help families and, help them land and develop a new life in Canada. The more I learned about you, the more I knew that there was something different about you. So we're in an age of COVID-19. And, you have this deep passion to help people. So I'd like to know a little bit about what you're doing that's tied to that passion to really help in this current situation.
So I could see that it's a crisis. Whenever there's a crisis, I tend to jump to how can I solve it? And with COVID-19, I was reading there's a shortage of ventilators. In Italy, you'd show up at the hospital, and if you're 75 years old, they say, oh, you go die on the gurney in the hall. There's not enough ventilators. So I said, well, if there's not enough ventilators, how do we make ventilators? So I put all of my designers and engineers at Danby Appliances on designing ventilators. And we progressed down that a little ways. We took a CPAP machine and it needed to have more pressure. So we added, a compressor and stuff like that. But very quickly we learned we didn't have the expertise to design or build a ventilator. So I called in my friends at ABS Friction and JMP Solutions and Crystal Fountain, and we started looking at what are the different options. And one of the options we came up with was a Medtronic design, but for that we needed a medical partner. So we called Baylis Medical, and so we did a venture where we're providing labor to assemble ventilators with Baylis. And so that's the pivot, but it's not a complete pivot. We're still making appliances, but that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, that just blows my mind when I think about it. And just for the audience benefit, Danby Appliances is a significant sized company. And to take a company, I think, when you talk, it simplifies it in our minds that you can do this pivot, but there's a lot more to it. And sometimes I like to quote books that I've read. I want to mention that Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, which was on my reading list. My first chair of the board gave it to me when I was an executive. And I learned in there something called the Hedgehog concept that, if it's not in your core competency, well, then, what? Find other ways, find a community. And Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, Jim, that is well read across the leadership world, really talks about the power of a mastermind, where two or more people or a community of minds coming together. And I'll throw one more in there just to get you excited. I'm a movie buff, and I talk through metaphors. And I remember the scene in Apollo 13. I don't know if you ever watched the Tom Hanks film, where they had a problem up in the lunar module. It was coming back to Earth, and it was starting to shut down, lose power. And they ended up getting a bunch of engineers at Mission Control coming in with a box of stuff. They dumped it on a table, and the commander said, now you got to take that and make that part. that they need up in space to repair the ship. What they'd really done is gone and taken all the stuff that was inside the module that they knew and created this device, and the astronauts then took it and built it and made it work and saved lives. So in some respects, making ventilators or partnering and pivoting isn't as simple as they say. But tell us, through this pivot in partnering with these other folks, you still have a business to run, and you don't want to take your eye off the ball. What are the top 3 business hacks to staying relevant in Danby, your own business, or Shipperby, while you have this other thing, this bright, shiny object that you're passionate about?
Well, I think as business leaders, we need to change, obviously, in the pandemic era. And the first thing that I've tried to get really good at is using video. So in our company, everyone's on Microsoft Teams, and instead of me walking past someone's desk, I just hit the button and I video talk to them. And video talk is just a little bit better than just straight phone call. Because really what we're trying to do is increase communication, and video is one way to increase communication. The second hack, I send a daily email, and I call it my wartime CEO update. And the format for my wartime CEO update, I try to be realistic, and I say, here's what I think is happening, and I include links to articles or whatever. And then I send here, this might interest you, just some stuff on interest, and what can we do? So we're not going to sell as many wine coolers right now because they're a luxury item and people don't spend money on luxuries, but we can focus on freezers because people are absolutely buying freezers. And then I end usually with a little bit of humor because we have to keep light and realize that it's not the end of the world. We will have a life during pandemic. We'll have a life post-pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling here about the appliances. Everybody, just a little plug for Jim's company. I bought an air conditioning unit the other year, and it came from Danby. And I walked into Costco, which most people know is a $8+ billion company. And by the way, not to embarrass you, Jim, because you don't have an ego, but Costco only puts things in their warehouses that are premium or the highest quality because it's a member-based subscription to shop there. And well, Jim's stuff is in there, so it's pretty cool. The humor side, I have a passion, as you know, for mental health. I did a TED Talk on it recently, and I was glad that you took a look at that, Jim. But I learned one thing in my TED Talk. I just want to share this and have you comment a bit about the humor. I'm going to set you up to give us an idea of what you might have said, if you can. But they say that if everything is too serious, people are on the edge of their seats, and at some point they need a release. And some people have said, why would you infuse humor into a very serious, tragic time? Well, it's because when the brain gets a release, then it's prepared to receive more and go deeper. And I learned that, and I live by that. So take us back into your communication. Give us a nugget. I mean, what might you say that is a bit of humor?
So usually it's not my humor. What I'm doing is sharing other people's humor. So I will share a link to a YouTube video of someone doing a song about COVID. I will do cartoons. There's lots of often cartoon. I actually sent one last night. It could be slightly off base, but it's a picture of a woman with a handkerchief wiping her child's nose, and the caption is, day 15 on homeschool, showing the child that what chloroform does to you.
All right, I think we get it. And I have a sort of a dark side of my humor, so you already got me on that one. I think that's great, Jim. And so going back to communication before we go to the third hack, and communication is important, of course. There are some people who will cover up reality. The type of leaders who are afraid to show vulnerability, that things are tough, and maybe sometimes not even paint the right picture. I want to just tell you that I was talking to a journalist a couple of weeks ago, and they're asking me my opinion on this. And I said, you know what, if you're a CEO running a company and you're at the top, all the people on the floors below, I want you to understand that even if there's no evidence that your workers are infected by the virus, just know they're already infected. They're already experiencing anxiety and stress. Why? Because they're looking at social media. They're seeing around them jobs being cut. They're talking to family members who have tragedies unfolding. And if they don't hear their boss or the top of the company talking to them, well, you know what? They go find their information elsewhere. So, tell us just quickly in your updates and communications, what's your perspective on that?
Well, my whole thing is all about communication. And it's not about completely reassuring that everything's fine. It's acknowledging the way things are. We all feel uncertain because we can't go to a restaurant and we can't go to a hockey game. And we all feel that uncertainty. That overlies everything we do, as well as huge uncertainty about the economy. Are people going to have jobs? Are they going to be able to buy fridges because they won't have any money? So it's a big, big reset. So mostly I just acknowledge it, and then share as much real information as I think is relevant. And then what can we do? You can always do things. Someone once said, it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to what happens to you. So what is happening, but how can we react in a way that's positive for us?
That's awesome, Jim. That's a teaching moment, everybody. I want to bring in another thread of mental health that just crossed my paper here. That anxiety is a big deal right now, Jim, as you know. Anxious, and I actually found the definition in a form of a fraction. I've never seen it put this way. People say, "What is anxiety?" Well, this is what it's defined as. It's a fraction. So, in the numerator is the fear that bad stuff will happen. The denominator is the belief that I can cope with things that will happen. That's the anxiety equation. So what I'm hearing you do in communicating and telling reality, providing assurances, a little bit of humor, is you're actually moving the dial on the bottom of that equation. And if we control the top, by increasing the bottom, anxiety goes down. And so way to go on some of the communication work you're doing. I remember last time we talked, you were talking about you as a leader. And you were very open about how sometimes you can be unfocused as a leader. And so you really work hard on staying on your game. Tell us how it is now. I mean, there is no focus. It's a crazy time.
Well, in peacetime, my lack of focus is not good as a CEO. We should be focusing and just sticking to the knitting. But in wartime, my lack of focus serves us well. I mean, the ventilator project is a perfect example. That's going to provide, we're providing labor with like 150 people. It's healthy for us to do that. It's good for our people. It means that they've got work to do, which they wouldn't otherwise have to do. So the lack of focus serves me well in wartime.
I think that's amazing. And there'll probably be some boards over the time through this period of time that will emerge through it and reassess even the leadership of their companies. And I do a lot of personality science, so I won't get into that, but it is true and no fault of any CEO or top leader, but some people are wired to be decisive and make decisions quickly, while others are wired to get stuck in the small details and worry about how we're going to get this done and never move forward. So I think, Danby's lucky to have you on board there with that type of thinking. Let me just go to the third hack. Tell us about that one.
So the third hack is basically redefine who you are. That means who you are as a person, also who you are as a business. The companies that will thrive are the ones that don't just say, oh, I am only a seated restaurant. You say, oh, no, I'm going to do takeout. I'm going to do, I know a guy that owns a company, a restaurant, crepes and coffee. So he's doing frozen crepes that he's selling to people, that kind of thing. And as far as redefining who you are as a person, I know when all of a sudden my gym closed, I have to redefine my success habits. What are my success habits when I work at home? It's different than my success habits when I'm working in an office. And a lot of our success has to do with our habits. So by redefining what those success habits are and who I am, I believe I would be more successful.
Well, that's great, Jim. Thanks for that insight. Everybody come back and listen to that. There's some teaching lessons there. I want to take a macro level view now, and for the benefit of our listeners, many will know what I mean, but I'll just say that I read somewhere, and it's true, that CEOs and boards are really paid to look up and out of the business. Managers are paid to look down and in, and I know you have to wear both hats, especially as you're wandering around talking to people. But when you look up and out and you look on the horizon from now, what has changed in the world? How has it changed from a macro perspective with this situation of COVID?
So from a macro perspective, e-commerce and parcel shipping is going to only increase. We're going to buy more online. That's perfect for my shipper bee company, which is basically a courier. delivering parcels. For Danby, we will be spending more time at home. There will be work at home. That means we'll need more refrigeration. There'll be more eating at home. That means we need more refrigerator space at home. We need more freezers at home. Ultimately, I think we'll be entertaining more at home. So I think that our will increase our sales on the wine coolers for home as well. But there will also be major things that change. We won't be going out to the mall as much, I don't think. We won't be going to sporting games. We won't be going to restaurants. We have a division that sells to hotels. I think that could be a challenge division in the coming years. We have a division that sells to college dorms. Same thing. But that business just shifts. It'll just become more home focused. So one door opens when another door closes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Everybody, when you hear Jim speaking there, I mean, a lot of those who are on their way up to becoming CEOs, that's what a good CEO is paid to do, is think strategically, look out, navigate the organization. But unfortunately, in a time like this with COVID, where you're hit and blindsided, you have to react fast. Mistakes will be made. And I want to ask you one tough question, that when you look at this, what's been the biggest setback? Could be family, personal, or business so far with this situation, and what did you learn from it?
I wouldn't say it's a huge setback. I tend to be an optimist, and I actually thrive on change. And I believe most business success happens when there is change. So change is opportunity. But what I've learned about myself is, prior to the pandemic, I would complain that I had to be out every evening, and I would complain that I had to travel all the time. And now that I almost say under house arrest at home, I'm antsy. I want to be to get out more. So I always thought I was an introvert that was forced to be in an extrovert world. Now I'm thinking maybe a little more extroverted than I thought. So it's a learning that I have about myself.
I love that. And, Jim, you sound like somebody who understands a bit about brain science. And what I'm hearing you say is words matter. I wrote down on my paper, change is opportunity, and then self-reflection. So if I put those on a whiteboard and I ask people to tell me about that, they wouldn't say COVID-19. If I put COVID-19 on a whiteboard, they would talk about all the bad stuff. So really what Jim's doing is he's changing the meaning of this whole experience, and he's using it as an opportunity. I honor that. That's just great thinking, Jim. I was just thinking about what you said about your video and communicating with people. You like humor, but I'll try to find it. But I found this really cool video on YouTube of this guy, and it's gone viral. So he basically was in his home, and he recorded a series of 1-minute videos where he was stressing out about being in self-isolation. So one of the shots was he had the camera outside his sliding door. He had his face pressed up against the sliding door in despair. And then there was this wording that came around it. It was hilarious. I'm thinking, maybe when you're antsy at home, you should shoot a short video clip showing your team what it really looks like. That might be fun. I want to just create a scenario for you here to comment on, because this came out of my head while you were talking a minute ago, and then we'll wrap up. And that is, when I go up to the macro level, my brain thinks in different ways, in that I gather information before I make a conclusion. I'm analytical. So, I found a few things over the last couple months, that pollution is down around the world. There were some images that were quite stark about the pollution change. That gas prices driving home the other day were down $1. Less cars on the road, as you know, especially in Ontario where you are. You probably see that in a big way. More family time, as you put it. And the other day I was video coaching a CEO, and I said to him, dude, I haven't seen you look like this before. And he was talking about making tea for his 91-year-old mother and being at home earlier. And he was on a lot of boards, and he said, I'm starting to realize at this age, do I really need that? And so managing our stress, maybe hitting the pause button, that reflection you talked about, the new ways of doing business. And so maybe, just maybe, this is my bold statement, our overworked lifestyles, believing that a quantity of stuff will give us a quality of life. Maybe our workaholism, our drive, maybe that's what's pushed us to the edge. And whoever created this situation really is for us to hit the pause button, to come out of it, maybe, like the hero's journey, with some learning to make some shifts. Let me know what you think.
I think you could be right on that. I'm an environmentalist. That's one of the reasons that we do shipper bees, because we can save energy. And I'm not sure there's anything we could have done that would have as much environmental impact in such short a time. So that is very positive. But the other part you talk about is, I think we will learn, if we will learn more about ourselves, and the more we get to know ourselves and who we really want to be, we have a choice to reform and make decisions who we really want to be. Because I think a lot of us have just sort of fallen into the trap of consumerism, the trap of being who other people think we should be. And this is a good time for reflection. And is that really what people want?
Well, thank you for that, Jim. And at this point in the show, I want to do what I always do. It's part of the DNA of the Quiet Warrior Show, and that is honor you with some leadership words. I write these down, everybody, as I'm talking to Jim. I don't script them. And the first one on my list is selfless. You hear that everything Jim does, he's so focused on helping others. Number 2 is decisive. I mean, we don't have to explain this, Jim. To do what you're doing with the pivot, make decisions fast, that's a great leadership trait. And then humility, it comes out of you in spades. And the last one I'll call trailblazing, because quite frankly, there are many CEOs out there like you running companies that haven't pivoted and created this, Ventilators for Canada organization. And so good on you. So Jim, the last word goes to you. Tell us, there's a website I know for ventilators if people want to check out the whole thing you're doing, and tell people how to get a hold of you.
So I have this little test with people. If anyone can't Google Jim Estill, Jimestill, then they probably don't deserve to get a hold of me. But my company is Danby Appliances. So that's danby.com or shipperbee.com. I have a blog at jimestill.com. And you also mentioned the Ventilators for Canadians .ca is another website. So lots of websites.
Oh, that's awesome. And, everybody, I would encourage you to check out the blog if you want to see how Jim writes and, some of the language, maybe that's a template for, something that you might be doing in your own work. So everybody, find this show on your favorite podcast channel. Give it a high rating to honor Jim's work. And Jim, thanks for being here. And we look forward to following the progress of this as it rolls out. And we'll be having you back again, I'm sure.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Jim. Everybody, live with passion. Find that purpose like you see Jim have, and live the life that you deserve and desire.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca